Hey guys, Ashley Francis here with Blue Sage Counseling and Wellness, your holistic mental health counselor. So I'm getting started a few minutes early tonight. As you can see, I am in my car, so I'm definitely doing this on the fly tonight. I just want to start with some updates. I just finished with a round of my spirituality group, and it went really well, really well. I had a presenter tonight, a colleague, Patrice Winovich. She represents her company, Nourish Your Noggin, which is a company that is focused on nutrition and educating people on the importance of nutrition. And she also helped tie things into spirituality and how important it is to eat a clean diet and how it helps to raise your vibration. And it helps with meditating and just helps for you to live your best life. So it was really good. It was really informative. We learned a lot about the importance of whole foods and really the truth of what our food is like. Coming from the grocery stores, just because it says organic doesn't necessarily mean that it is. And the nutrient density of fruits and vegetables is not necessarily what we think it is. In fact, it's drastically less. I think she had said something about it being like 10% of what it used to be even 40, 50, 80 years ago. So, that's really unsettling. That's really unsettling. But, So it was great. It was great to have that education, and it's, as many of you know, nutrition is really, really important to me. I started a health and wellness reboot about a year ago, and since then I've lost 80 pounds, and it's really, really important to get those nutrients in, and for the overall health, really. So that was tonight. It was great. It was great, and I'll keep you guys posted on other topics that are talked about in the spirituality group as well. This current round is lasting through the end of August, and we'll have another round that will be starting in the beginning of September. So if you are in the Charlotte area and you are looking for a spiritual home, looking for a place to come to congregate and talk with like-minded individuals about spiritually based practices and ideals and concepts, and just really looking to connect with your sense of community, we would love to have you. I do have a vetting process. So if you're interested, then just give me a call at 704-778-6141, or you can email me at Ashley, ASHLEY, at bluesagecounselingandwellness.com. And I'd love to talk to you, and we could get you set up for the September round. So on to business. So as some of you know, I have started a Ask the Therapist a Facebook Live edition that I'm going to be doing every week on Tuesdays. And basically what this is anybody that wants to tune in during this time, then you get to ask a licensed professional counselor any questions you want, and I will answer them to the best of my ability, within reason, of course, and within ethics and laws abiding. So yes, this is something new that I've started. It's a way for me to give back. One of the biggest complaints that I get from people is that therapy is too expensive, and it limits access to mental health care, which is one of the most important things, particularly in this country, I think. So it's a way, in addition to the spirituality group that I hold, which is donation based. This is my way to be able to offer resources to those that otherwise don't have access to it or can't afford it. So keep this in mind. If you've got questions, I encourage you to ask them live right now on the chat. But you can also send them to me over email, and I'll give you the information at the end of the video of where to send them to. So over the past week, I got quite a few questions. So I thank you guys for reaching out and thinking of me and sending them to me. It was really hard to pick just 2 questions for today's episode, but I was able to do it. So the first one is coming from Jenny F. She tuned in last week and had a question. And her question is, what is it that you do, or what is it that you can do when other people are blocking you from being able to see certain family members or friends? this actually is a pretty common thing that's come up. In fact, it was something that I've been talking about with a client in the recent weeks and months. And it makes sense, right? Because families can be dysfunctional, families can have a lot of conflict. And when that's the case, then trying to block someone to have access to someone else, it comes up. It's a problem. Particularly what comes to mind for me are children. If it's a divorce situation where mother and father are no longer together, and they might wind up putting the children in the middle, and because of a custody case or for whatever reason, could be abuse, could be neglect, or it just could be because one of the parents is being spiteful. That's a common reason that the kids will get blocked from being able to have access to their parents. But there's a lot of different examples. Maybe two siblings got into a fight, and maybe they're blocking access to other family members as a result of that fight. But oftentimes it is out of spite. So that's one thing to recognize, is that where this is coming from is a place of spite. And so that's really the issue that you want to work on. So this is kind of an open-ended question. I'll answer it to the best of my ability within the context of how it makes sense to me. And Jenny, if you have any further questions, or if I'm not answering the right questions, then please let me know, and I'd be happy to provide a follow-up. So what comes to mind is getting connected with the person that is doing the blocking. So if you have the ability to be able to contact them, my suggestion would be for it to be face-to-face. Oftentimes we'll hide behind our phones, texting in particular, that is incredibly impersonal. Phone calls are better, but really what I would suggest is having a conversation face-to-face, because 90% of our communication is nonverbal. And if you are missing being able to sit face-to-face, body-to-body with someone else, then you're missing a majority of that communication, and as well as the ability to be able to connect and problem solve. So if at all possible, that's the first thing I recommend, is get face-to-face with that person if you're able to. And the second thing would be to practice active listening. And for some people, this is really, really hard. The whole premise, the whole underlying idea behind active listening is to tune out distractions and be completely present into the conversation. So speaking of nonverbal language, one of the things that you want to do is practice open body language. So if you're sitting there with your arms crossed and you have a scowl on your face, you're not very open. You're communicating to other people that you're not interested in the conversation, or you're resistant to the conversation. And you're setting the tone for the rest of the way it's going to go. So be really mindful of that. Try to keep your arms uncrossed. Try to be mindful of your facial expression. Try to keep it as neutral as possible. Right then and there, you're already setting such a great tone for an open conversation, because your body and your face are open to receiving. So that's the first thing I would say, is get real keen, real clear on your body language and your presence that you're bringing to the conversation. And then the next thing would be to take a curious stance. Now, this is by far the most important part of active listening, and it's a building block. It's what we're taught in grad school to become a therapist. Active listening is the bedrock of therapy. If you do not have a therapist that is actively listening, you're going to know it. You're going to see from their body language, from their mannerisms to the way that they talk and the way that they ask questions. It's pretty easy to see when somebody's not fully present in a conversation. So So active listening is based on being curious. So you might be going into this conversation with a lot of preconceived notions or assumptions or judgments because you've been slighted, right? They've blocked you from being able to have access to someone else. So you already have feelings about that going into it. Just acknowledge that. Acknowledge what you're bringing to the table, but try to breathe into it. Try to notice that they're just feelings. They're just observations that you have. And try to practice some empathy, which is basically being able to tap into how that other person could possibly be feeling. They might be feeling embarrassed. They might be feeling rejected themselves. They might actually be blocking you from having access to someone else as a reaction of their perception of your behavior. Maybe they feel like you're being standoffish or you're being judgmental. So those are all things to be mindful of, and it's also things that you're not going to be privy to without getting curious, without having an open conversation. And so often, because people are not doing this, it leads right to fights. It leads to stalemates. You've got siblings and family members that haven't talked to each other in years, and had they just had an open, honest conversation, none of that would happen. And it's never too late. You can always practice these skills. You can go to a therapist and practice these things, and get better and better at them. And you'd be surprised of really how simple it can be to be able to work through these things. And I always like to say that it may be simple, but it's not easy, because being able to sit there with all of those emotions and try to stay present and get curious and to not lose your temper is really, really challenging. So that's why I like to say that it's simple, but it's not necessarily easy. So when you're taking that curious stance, the best way to do that is to ask open-ended questions. So you want to stick with your who, what, where, when, and how. You do want to try to stay away from why as much as possible. Why? Because why can be judgmental. It can come across as accusatory. Why are you doing this? Or why are you not doing that? It automatically sets up the conversation for an easy shutdown. So by all means, if you are able to avoid why, try to do that. So focus on the who, what, where, when, and how. Where did this come from? When did this start? You say that you started having these feelings of animosity towards me. Well, when did that exactly start for you? Or where does this show up? Who's involved when these things start to come about? What environments do you feel this way? In what environments do you not feel this way too? Like maybe you feel completely safe being able to express yourself in front of other people, but once it gets... if you're alone with that person, then maybe that is the time that these things start to come about. So you really want to get very clear on the environments and the circumstances in which these things are coming up. And if you just ask questions, the who, what, where, when, and how, you'd be surprised how far you can get in a conversation. And this goes for any conversation. If you're practicing active listening, this is what you do. And there's actually an exercise I remember that I learned when I was studying to become a therapist, where all you do, you interact with a partner, and all you do is ask questions. So the craft of that is you ask a question, you get the answer from the client, and then you have to respond with another question, which it's difficult to do the longer that you do it, but it's a really good practice to get in the habit of, how far can I go with this? How deep can I really go with this conversation? And if you're approaching it with the mind frame of having open-ended questions, you're going to get so much information that you never even thought. And not only that, the added bonus is that you get a deepened relationship with that person, because oftentimes they're going to feel heard, they're going to feel understood, and they're going to feel validated because you care. You're actually asking them and going the extra mile of connecting with their inner world and their inner experience. And if there's anything that each of us love, it's talking about ourselves, right? So if you can get in a position to where you're putting them in the position of authority and they're able to talk about things from their perspective, you'd be surprised at how much they'll open up. So what we've covered so far is the nonverbal communication. Make sure your body language and your facial expressions are open and neutral. And then also practicing some active listening. and really from there, you should have a pretty good idea of where you stand with that person. And there's still that possibility that after asking those questions and getting the answers, it could still go awry. It could still be difficult. It may still result in a fight or another stalemate. But at least you have set the stage for inviting more curiosity and more information into the situation, which is more than you had before. So what you're basically working up to is you're engaging them, you're feeling that sense of connection. And everybody knows, when you feel connected to somebody. It's one of those experiences that happens on the inside that really you don't need words for. So once you feel that connection is there, then you want to start to pick apart, figuring out, well, why did you block me from this person? What was going on there? What did I say? What did I do? You could even ask, what are some things that I could do differently? And then it's up to you to take that feedback and determine if it's something that you want to integrate into your life or not. Just because that person says that doesn't necessarily mean it's something that you have to do. So that is the time that you can start to hone in on all of that good information. But I really wouldn't recommend doing that until you've set that groundwork, until you know that you have connected with that person on a deeper level. So those would be the main things. I would say that's a good starting point. Like I said, if you have other questions, or if you feel like it's a more convoluted situation, then I'd recommend talking it over with a friend or another family member or your therapist to be able to get a little extra insight on how that might go. Talking about the example of how kids can kind of be caught in between. So if a kid is being blocked from being able to have access to another parent, for instance. So if a mother is keeping the child from having access to the father. So, or no, I don't want to use that example. I think an easier example would be, let's say it's a grandparent. A grandparent has been blocked from having access to their grandchildren by the parents, which would be the son or the daughter of the grandparent. So if that's the case, and that happens a lot, actually, as you can imagine. So if the child is being blocked or the grandparent is being blocked from having access to each other, one of my favorite things is to keep record of the times that you have attempted to reach them, or even if you just wanted to reach them and you're not able to, and maybe there's law enforcement involved and you're not able to. Take pictures of the things that you create for them. Just because a birthday is coming around or Christmas is coming around doesn't mean that you can't do anything for that grandchild. In fact, it's devastating when these anniversaries and holidays come around and you're not able to celebrate them with that child. So what I would recommend is get the card anyway. Get the gift anyway. You could even wrap it up if you want to. You want to kind of simulate the situation so that you're able to celebrate in spirit. And that's really important because that helps to move the emotions that you're feeling anyway. You're feeling sad. You're going to feel disappointed. You might feel some anger. And if you're not doing anything about it, then it's just going to fester and it's going to grow and it's going to grow and grow. And that's when it leads to depression and even worse results. So the whole idea is create a simulation for yourself for the whole purpose of being able to get those emotions to move so that you're not holding on to them and they're not creating more problems for you down the road. But then I'd even say to take a step further and take a picture of it. Keep a record of all these things that you're doing. There's going to come a time when that child is of age and you might have access to them again. And imagine what a gift that would be if you had a record or even a scrapbook or some sort of way of being able to keep track and document all of these things that you had been doing for the child over the years. That'd be amazing. That would be absolutely fantastic. So that's a good example of something that you can do for grandchildren that have been blocked from their grandparents. So I hope that this answers your question, Jenny. If it does not, then let me know. Like I said, I'd be happy to follow up and answer more of the question as it pertains to your particular situation. So we've got time for one more question. And this question comes up all the time. It is by far one of the most common reasons that people will reach out for therapy. And that is people that are experiencing anxiety for the first time and don't know what it is. This is really difficult. Usually people have a running understanding that what they're feeling is nervousness, or they might even call it anxiety, but they don't truly understand what clinical anxiety looks like or feels like, particularly with panic attacks. Panic attacks are really, really tough because they're all encompassing, they're frightening as hell, and usually people will get it confused with something biological that's happening. Something physical, which it is something physical that is happening, but the origin of it's in the brain. It's coming from anxiety and fear. So there's a lot of different ways we could look at this, and what I'll choose to do is focus on just general anxiety and being able to identify what it is. So general anxiety is something that we experience in times when we're feeling uncertain, or if we're feeling that there is fear. And it's an uncertainty of the future. That's clear, cut, and dry. Basically, what anxiety is a fear of what's going to happen in the future. And when we experience that fear over and over again, it starts to get programmed into the brain, but it also starts to get programmed into the body as well. And so what happens is we're creating what's called neural networks. Your neurons connect to one another when you learn something new. The synapses, the little legs that are attached to the neurons, are connecting with one another, and that's what results in learning. So we can learn regular things when we're in school, and this is how that happens. But also we learn different ways of communicating, we learn different ways of relating to one another, and habits and things like that. And if all of these neural networks are based on fear or uncertainty, then it's going to get reinforced every single time you have a thought or a feeling that's associated with fear. So really what you're doing is you're kind of setting yourself up for a worst case scenario to begin with, because what winds up happening is those neural networks get reinforced and it just becomes even worse. And then it can start to be automatic. Now that you're not even thinking about those things that you were scared about, or the negative feelings, and it starts to become second nature. So that is usually when clients start to come to see me, is when the anxiety has reached a point that they don't even recognize. It's gotten so bad that it's literally driving them, and they no longer feel like they're in control of their thoughts and feelings. So yeah, the anxiety and being able to recognize it. What I would say is when to reach out for help as it pertains to that anxiety is if it is interfering with your daily tasks most days of the week. That's the best way to determine if you need extra help. So if you're just an anxious person by nature, and you have good coping skills, you're sort of familiar with the awareness of when anxiety comes up, then I don't usually see those people. They're not coming to therapy because they know what it is, they have the skills, and they're able to work through it. But it's those folks that maybe had coping skills for most of their lives, and then didn't realize that there was a breakdown, that there was a lessening or a decrease in the supportive networks that they have in their lives. For instance, life transitions, going away to college, starting a new job, having a baby, getting married. So all of these things will bring new challenges and new aspects to your life, but at the same time, you also start to lose things during those transitions as well. And people don't realize what that can be doing to them emotionally, even physically, but also spiritually as well. So what I wind up seeing is maybe there was underlying anxiety that was there all along, but it didn't really reach a clinical level until a major or significant event has happened. So like maybe a car accident or an injury or a bad breakup. Then all of a sudden all these things start bubbling up to the surface, and they're overwhelmed. All of a sudden they're having constant panic attacks. They can't get rid of the worry. They can't keep playing the worst case scenario in their head. And it's miserable. It's an absolute miserable experience. And I'm also speaking from personal experience, because this happened to me too. That was exactly what happened. I had a significant life event that happened, and it was just like the floodgates opened. It just kind of gave this anxiety free range and permission to just take over. And what's happening is you've got the limbic system is responsible for your emotions, and the prefrontal cortex and neocortex are responsible for your executive decision making, your focus, your concentration. So when you're in a state of anxiety to this degree, what happens is that limbic system starts to go haywire. It's on overdrive. And what it'll do is, the way I like to explain it, is it's like putting a residue on that prefrontal cortex, those thinking parts of the brain. So it literally shuts those parts of the brain down. And all of a sudden you are just overwhelmed with anxiety, worry, and panic. So as I was saying, it can be a very physical experience. So if you are caught in that feedback loop, then the physical aspects of it is that you don't have a functioning brain. And sometimes you can literally feel it. I know that there were times where I could literally feel like I was not connected. I could feel like my head was just swimming and the thoughts were on repeat. It just felt like that hamster in the wheel and I couldn't get off. And that's what's hard too, is you got smart people that may typically know how to help themselves when they're feeling anxiety, but when it's overloaded that way, your brain's not functioning the way that it normally does. So it becomes significantly harder to be able to practice memory recall, to call upon the things that you already know, to be able to recognize in the moment the things that are good for you or bad for you, because literally your brain is just flooded with all of this emotion, and it's not allowing your brain to think properly. So essentially that's what's going on. If you are a person that has had low level anxiety, or even if you didn't even notice you had anxiety, and all of a sudden your life is crippled, it's completely brought to your knees because of this anxiety, that's usually what's happening. There's something that has unleashed it, and what I would recommend is to work with your therapist to get really crystal clear on what it is that happened that caused this release. And oftentimes people don't know, and that's okay. It doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you. It doesn't mean that you're not smart. It just means that there may be a level of awareness that hasn't been reached yet for you to be able to identify what was it that switched. Sometimes it's really hard. Sometimes it can be really minute and nuanced, and you don't even know that it's happening. So don't be hard on yourself if you feel like you have a good level of awareness and still you're not able to figure it out. It's okay. There's a lot of things that are also trapped in the subconscious, which are the things that we don't have conscious access to, that it takes another professional. It takes somebody on the outside to be able to ask the right questions or engage you in the right exercises to be able to uncover what's going on the deeper levels. So oftentimes that's what I find to be the most fascinating, but it's also the most helpful as well, is to be able to engage people in those types of exercises. And the things that come out of that are just incredible. To see clients light up when they're able to finally put their finger on something that they've been trying to figure out for months and sometimes even years. And they've been living miserable lives. They just want their lives back. They want that joy back. And sometimes just being able to uncover where that came from makes all the difference. So we covered a lot, and I really appreciate everybody for watching. I will encourage you to please reach out. Let me know, what questions do you have? Again, this is an edition called Ask the Therapist. It's a program called Ask the Therapist. And what I do is every Tuesday is I compile your questions, and I take 2 questions every week and answer them to the best of my ability. So let me know, what questions do you have? Let me know what you think about this segment. And I'd really appreciate to hear the feedback. You could leave them in the comments, or you can email me to Ashley, ASHLEY, at bluesagecounselingandwellness.com. That's blue like the color, sage like the herb, counseling and wellness all spelled out.com. Also, if you are interested in working with me, please visit my website at www.bluesagecounselingandwellness.com. go to the info drop down, select online booking, and select a free 15-minute phone consultation with me to see if we are a good fit. And I also have lots of other goodies too on my website. I also have blogs, I have vlogs. I've got all kinds of free, interesting tips. So if you're not ready to sign up for therapy, then I would encourage you to go to the website and check out the things that I already have there. And sign up for our email list, and you'll also get all of these great free tips to your inbox on a weekly basis. Again, you can send that to Ashley, ASHLEY, at bluesagecounselingandwellness.com, and the website is www.bluesagecounseling.com. Well, that will do it for this week's segment, and I hope you guys take care.